primarily partner with Target.
If you want to be a brand that really can stand the test of time and especially live in retail stores, you need Black women consistently see negative imagery about themselves in media, and we want them to have a brand where they come back and really see themselves in a way that they haven't seen themselves before.
You started with 4 journals, then hit 6 figures in 5 days.
You can get a brand in retail, but staying in retail is by far the hardest thing. I don't believe in hiring ahead of need. I believe in hiring as you need things. And honest truth is that there's some retailers out there that won't work with you unless you...
Welcome back to another episode of And This. I am your host, Jasmin Foster, and today I am here with another Jasmin, spelled differently. I am so excited. We're friends in real life. This is my boo, but she is the founder and CEO of Be Rooted, which is an inclusive stationery brand that you can find at Target. She has an amazing story. We have such similarities, and I definitely wanted to share her with you today. So I am excited to welcome Jasmin to the And This podcast.
Hey, girl.
Hi, friend.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So, how you feeling? How are you?
I'm feeling good. We spring, about to be summer. Ready to be outside and having fun this year. So after owning a company for 4 years and like head down, I'm ready to actually focus on myself and have some fun this summer.
Okay, so that is a perfect quick segue into how Be Rooted got started, because it is a stationery brand. Like, I have multiple journals.
Absolutely.
But that was actually part of your self-care routine. So just tell us a little bit about how you got started, because we share similar backgrounds. We were both in the buying space at corporate retailers, honey, not just local mom and pop.
Say that.
Clear. But managing multi-million-dollar categories for billion-dollar retail organizations. And so just you with this shift of now having your own product brand, tell us how Be Rooted got started.
God, yeah. I mean, so I've always been that girl that had way too many journals, way too many notebooks. I'm a Virgo, so we know we got to have some stuff to help us keep organized. And I've always felt like there was a disconnect for me in the aisle. Though I've loved writing and I've always used planners to keep my day focused, there was never really a brand that was out there that was speaking directly to Black and brown women. And so when I left Target to go work for this amazing multicultural skincare brand, I saw from the bottom up what it was like to run a business. And in 2020, when the pandemic hit and I had all this extra free time, I was like, why am I helping someone else build a brand? Why don't I take back my time and do something for myself and build a brand that I've always wanted to see? So in that, Be Rooted was birthed by me really just wanting to interweave my passion of writing and chasing my dreams, while also wanting Black women to feel seen and having a place where they can call themselves home.
I love that. As far as the Be Rooted that we know and love, was that always the vision? What? I understand how you got to it, but just creating a brand is hard.
Yeah.
So from that disconnect of not seeing what you wanted to see in aisles, how did you then go to, light bulb, let me launch this stationery brand?
So when I started, I knew I always wanted to have a lifestyle brand. I was for Black women, but my coins couldn't afford that. So I had to start with a product category that I loved. And so when we launched, we literally just launched with 4 journals. Because that was the category that I felt like in the middle of the pandemic, people needed space and time to actually write their thoughts and go back and leverage their journals as a way to have mental health during that time frame. But then from there, we expanded to what you see now, which is having planners, which is having writing instruments, puzzles. We have home goods. We have more stuff on the way. And so we're really trying to build this full lifestyle brand for Black women to have products that are reflective of themselves, while also having uplifting and empowering messaging. Because as you know, Black women consistently see negative imagery about themselves in media, and we want them to have a brand where they come back and really see themselves in a way that they haven't seen themselves before.
And I just really want to quickly point out what she just mentioned. So again, she and I both were buyers. So we understand product assortment, product mix, expanding that product assortment. But she said she started with 4 journals. And then she expanded. So I think it's important, especially if you're a product-based business owner, to think about what that product roadmap looks like. Like you knew that, hey, I'm going to start with this because this is what I'm most passionate about. This is probably the easiest to get to market.
Yeah.
But I already see the full vision that I want to create this as a full line of lifestyle products for Black women.
Absolutely. I mean, whether you're talking to retailers, investors, people wanting to support your brand, they're always going to ask you, like, what's next?
What's the
like?
What else you got?
Like, there are so many successful TikTok brands that just have one product. But if you want to be a brand that really can stand the test of time and especially live in retail stores, you need to always be thinking about, like, what's next? What's your product pipeline? What's innovation look like for you? And so my pockets didn't allow me to do that from day one. But as you see success in one area, you can continue to grow.
Exactly. Another key, again, retailers, especially mass retailers, like when you're working with a buyer, they don't bring in a product to just have it, you know, in and out, right? Like they want to work with brands that are going to stay on shelves and have longevity. So when you're able to provide that roadmap, they can see you being on shelves long term, even if you aren't there yet. It's just the fact that you are already thinking, what does the next 2-3 years look like from a product perspective? So I think that that's super important.
Absolutely.
So obviously your journey wasn't an overnight success, right? So what are some things that you had to endure to just kind of keep continuing on the path, especially with product? Like retail is the hardest in terms of just the industry to be a part of. It is one of the hardest to be a part of. So what are some things that you went through in your journey that allowed you to just say, I'm going to continue no matter what?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really two things that come to mind. The first is when I was starting a stationery brand, people were like, why are you starting a brand in the paper category? Haven't that seen declines? Like, why are you doing this? Like, your background's in beauty, just sell some lip gloss. Like, you don't have to do this.
And then,
right. And then secondly, they was like, and then you're going to take that box and make it even smaller because you only want to focus with Black and brown folks. You want your brand to be solely centered around Black women. And so for me, like it was hard hearing that messaging in the beginning, but I've been super clear on what my like purpose and passion is for a very long time. I've been able to work with the big guys and sell to everyone and have the, $100 million P&Ls I've worked with. But what I found most in my career is when I got to work with Black and brown entrepreneurs, when I was working at Target, building up the multicultural segment, I found the most passion when I've been able to work in the Black community and do work that's centered around Black women specifically. And so I felt completely comfortable with starting a brand that I knew that even if it maybe didn't live up to other people's expectations, at the end of the day, it'd be doing the work that I felt most passionate about. And so I think that like when you know your why, and you know why you're doing something, regardless what the outcomes are, you're able to get up every day and be like super excited about it because you know that you're focused on what you should be doing, what you're put on earth to do. The second thing, more practically, is that when we were expanding, there was a couple of times when we got things wrong. So for Black History Month a couple of years ago, we did these really cute wood trays, and I was so super excited about having wood trays that you could put like in your living room, and it had a beautiful imagery of a Black woman in the bottom of it. Girl, why they show up to the shelf half broken? I worked with a supplier that really kind of sold me a dream on what their capabilities were. I also underestimated your products moving throughout the supply chain in mass retail. When things were shipped to my warehouse to be shipped on DTC, they were fine. But when you're shipping to mass retail, it got on a boat, it got put to a DC, it got sent to a store, it got thrown in a cart, and then once it got thrown in the cart, it got put on a shelf, now it got thrown back in another customer's cart. And so we took a fair amount of damages on that product type. And, it was a lesson for me in how I vet suppliers. It was a lesson for me to think through what does testing look like. And so as an entrepreneur, I feel like you're going to fall down, like, if not daily, at least weekly and make a mistake. But I feel like at the end of the day, like these lessons that I'm learning are building me for something greater.
I love that. A couple of things that I want to point out. One is people need to understand, like going into mass retail is not cheap, first of all.
No.
Because those damages that she just mentioned, she has to pay for those.
Absolutely. Still paying
for those damages.
Because they get 2 years to charge you back on those.
2 years. Imagine getting an invoice 2 years later.
You like, we're still on this?
Wait.
I thought we was over this.
How much is that? What did you, like, I know brands that have been hit with like $1 million damage invoices years later.
Yeah.
And financially, like, sometimes that can break you. That's why I always say, like, retail is not for everyone. And you need to have your ducks in a row and your cash flow straight, because it can take you out.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I wanted to note is that you used your corporate retail experience to help you grow your business. So for all of you that are still working your 9 to 5, like, start identifying, what can I take from my current job, you know, my current place of employment, that will allow me to maneuver into other areas. Like, do you need to go sit with the marketing team? Do you need to go sit with the sales team? Do you need to go sit with the customer service team, especially if you're a solopreneur? So that you're then equipped for all of the things that are going to come when you're running a product-based business.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, leverage your 9 to 5 as free education. Like,
X.
If you plan on being an entrepreneur at some point, why learn all the mistakes on your own? Like, learn some of those mistakes there so that you can carry a lot of that on with you. And another thing that I did after I left big corporate, I went and worked for a small brand. And so to me, that was I didn't know it at the time, but that was the biggest learning ground for me to get inside of a small brand that was fast moving, fast growing, and got to play multiple different hats. Yes, I was the director of sales, but also got to be the PR manager one day. I was the operations another day. I got to do sometimes I was talent. Like, I got to do so much. And I would say, like, I know a lot of times those big corporations can pay you the checks, right? But there's some invaluable and tangible experience that you can go to work for a smaller mid-sized company, especially if you're looking to go at it and do it your own one day, just to get that free insight. And you might decide, yes, this is for me, or you might say, like, nah, I'm good.
So I'd love for you to share, because again, a lot of brands want to get into mass retail, but kind of take us through like what those stepping stones were. So you started with 4 journals. Did you then hit, 6 figures in 5 days, like, online makes it out to be? And like, what was kind of that path like? And then how did you eventually get into Target?
Yeah, I mean, I love that because everyone has a 6-figure business and it all happened on like day one.
Yeah.
So I mean, I remember those early stages when we launched the journals, the 4 journals. It was all about trying to get an order a day. Like, to be honest, that was my original goal. And then once we got past that, we got a lot of really amazing press early on, and we had a hard time staying in stock. And so we kept ordering like what was my MOQ at my domestic manufacturer, and then we sell out, and then I had to get back in stock, and then we would sell out. And because of that press, we got on the radar of 3 different retailers that were interested in supporting Black-owned brands. And because I had a background in retail, I knew that going to retail wasn't easy. And so as many people that I know often are just happy to have the conversation with a retailer, like, I was honestly interviewing them because the worst thing for me, as we talked about, was that you can get a brand in retail, but staying in retail is by far the hardest thing. And at a brand of my size, I think I had like under 500 Instagram followers. Like, I think I was making like less than like, $5,000 in sales a month at that time. Like, super, super, super small brand at this time. I wanted to make sure that I was with a retail partner that would truly be a partner, because as most people will say, it's up to you to drive your customer to retail. But I ain't have that many customers, not to be driving to like that level, right? And so I wanted to make sure that if I got to retail, it would be with someone that was on this for a journey and not somebody that was just looking to check a box and say that they support a Black-owned brand. And so
I love that. What are some questions you asked when you were kind of doing those interviews to retail partners? Like, what are some key things that you wanted to understand and know from them before you decided? Because to your point, a lot of brands will have a conversation with the buyer and they're just excited, right? They want that big PO.
Absolutely.
But they want that big PO, but they don't understand everything that comes along with it. So since, you and I are more versed in the space, right? We have a privilege there. What are some things that brands should be asking?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I want to know is, are you new to this or are you true to this? So have you had other diverse-owned brands within your program before? Yes or no? If not, how will you get smart on who this customer is and what's the best way to support them? If yes, tell me about some of your success stories. Because oftentimes when you're the first that someone ever, maybe you're the first small brand, the first Black-owned brand, whatever it is, if they're not used to working with small brands, they're not equipped to maybe having to answer the amount of questions that you have or understanding what your success metrics could look like or even pulling the right levers to help you get to your customer. So I wanted to make sure that I personally was working with someone who had other opportunities to work with small brands so that I wasn't there, I guess, just like their person they were trying this out on. Yeah. The second thing is I wanted to understand what does success look like. So have you identified for me early on before we say yes, what does success look like from a productivity standpoint? So what that means is the amount of units or dollars I'm supposed to drive per store per week. And then how long do I have to get there? So I know that from my background when I was in beauty, oftentimes when the brand got on shelf, they had about 8 to 10 weeks before we started making decisions on what next year looked like. That's a really quick time for a small brand to be able to ramp and get to success and to perform. So I wanted to understand, what's your category average? Do you understand that I'm probably not going to be able to hit category or average from day one? And if so, then what does my trajectory look like, and how do we build this together? And I would say the third thing that I asked was, I'm going to be doing everything in my power to push and make this successful. Do you have anything in your toolkit to help me?
I love that.
Does that look like, is there placements that are free for you, like website placements I can have? Target doesn't really do this, but other retailers have placements in their email. Can I partner with your social team? Even small things like, can Target social follow me back? Because all of those things help with the algorithm, right? And so those were 3 of the mini questions. But I would say if you have a brand that's looking to get into retail, those are probably some of the important questions. And whether you're a Black-owned brand, whether your brand is a naturals category, whether your brand, whatever your niche is, helping to understand that for your niche, I think is really important to understanding success.
That's so good. And I'm glad you shared, because we don't hear that often, right? We hear oh, it's so hard to talk to a buyer, or, we hear all these things, but we don't hear what are some key questions that we as founders should really be asking to ensure that our brand stays on shelf. You mentioned, hey, is there opportunity to get featured on social and emails? Can you put me on the website banner? Is there any off-shelf placement that could be incremental, during key moments of the year? There are so many additional things that brands should be asking for outside of just a specific door count.
Are you a product-based business owner that's ready to scale? I've compiled my industry experience and knowledge into bite-sized resources that you can access anytime, anywhere at jasminboundary.shop. You'll get actionable insight, advanced strategies, and in-depth knowledge on how to grow your product-based business. Visit jasminboundary.shop today, and let's take your brand to the next level. Now, back to the episode.
Oh my God, and I can't believe I missed this, because this is so... You got to understand the financials. So a lot of times people get in and then they learn what the financials are. So you need to be asking, what is IMU expectations?
That means initial markup.
What is your expenses as in regards to maybe damages, whether it might be markdown support, whether there's going to be a marketing or co-op fee that you have to pay for. If you don't succeed, what does the exit plan look like? Understand that all up front, so that when you're building out your P&L, you're able to put line items in that say, if this happened, then X will happen. So that way you're not at the end of the year surprised by anything. And I think more people should ask that like in conversation number one than waiting for the yes and then being surprised on the back
end. Because it's all in the contract. Like it's part of the negotiation. As buyers, we negotiated these terms. Like, actually, no, there's no net 30, honey. It's more like net 180.
Yeah.
Meaning you'll get paid in 180 days, not 30 days.
Yep.
Like all of these things, you know, you're able to negotiate. But when you don't know, right? Which is also key. I think a lot of brands going into retail don't hire, like there are attorneys that deal with like retail contracts.
Yeah.
Like an entertainment attorney probably is not the one that should be negotiating.
Or your mama,
or your mama. Right,
or
exactly.
Your family
it looked
attorney.
Good, baby, I think. Yeah, that sounds good. How much is the order? What?
Yeah.
How much is the purchase order? Yeah, just sign it.
I mean, but honestly, like, I didn't pay for a retail attorney because for the most 80% of that contract, you ain't gonna be able to change.
Facts.
Like it's just like when
they're standard terms.
So like I don't want to get y'all thinking that like you can go in there redlining all because they're not gonna do nothing.
That's true.
But those key financial things, you definitely have room to try to move them in whatever favor, and it always can't just be everything positive on your end. It's like, okay, how about I give you better IMU, but instead of net 180, I'm looking for net 60. And also understand what your buyer cares about. And the way that you need to do that is there's brokers, depending on the retailer that you work for, that have long-lasting history and relationships with these retail buyers. And they can help you understand like, yo, Amanda always wants to make sure that she's hitting margin, but she don't really care about payment terms. All right, bet. So I know when I go into this negotiation, I'm going to make sure she gets 100% of the margin that she's looking for, but I'm going to press harder over here. And so you'll learn that over time through your own relationships, or you can pay for it up front by working with brokers or sales reps.
So let's talk about that because we've had talks about this offline before, right? Like, it's not that I'm against brokers, you know, because as a buyer, like that's who I, you know, interchangeably, some people call them sales reps, some people call them brokers. It just really just depends. But I feel as more smaller brands have gotten into retail, brokers have taken advantage of the limited knowledge. So I've heard of brokers out here charging 30% of the purchase order, which is like absolutely crazy. Like that's crazy, guys. And just to kind of backtrack, just if you know are new here, you don't understand what we're talking about. Brokers are people, as Jasmine mentioned, can help you navigate that buyer relationship because they typically have something long-standing with the retailer that they're working with. And so they can help you when you're going through the line review process, when you're negotiating, when you're trying to get on shelf. However, they are going to take a percentage of, you know, that purchase order amount, but just some have just been super crazy. I was like 30%, like that's robbery. So if you're going to use a broker, one, do you think that if somebody is initially going into retail, like, yes, hire a broker and hire one fast?
Okay, so this is a question because I think there's a couple of things. The honest truth is that there's some retailers out there that won't work with you unless you have a broker. So I've sold into almost every single mass grocery and drug retailers, and they all have different ways of doing business. Some actually prefer you go at it your own because they want to make sure that they're maintaining as much profitability on their end. And some are managing 100 to 150 other vendors, and they don't want to get an email from you.
They're like, listen, I don't have time
to reply to answer to every last single one of your questions. And so they won't work with you unless. So
that's so true.
I think it's identifying that first, right? Because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot because you won't operate in the lane in which it's expected to be operated. I think, the other thing is about partnership and who's going to be in it. So I personally believe that a broker should never get paid until you get paid. Period. So from my background, all of the good brokers don't take a cut until you get your first, not PO, but until you get your first check. And then they always get paid net profit after your check. So if you received any expenses, damages, allowance fees, they're supposed to be paid after all of that.
Right.
Also, I've never personally seen a broker's commission be higher than 5%. So if someone is giving you more, asking for more than 5%, I would be wary of that because that is greater than industry standard. And unless they're providing you over and beyond normal broker like activities, like whether they might be giving you like access to data, maybe they're able to CAD stuff for you. Like, I don't know, maybe they're a part of your helping you innovate, but if they're not going to be doing like integral tasks, then like, nah. But I do think that if a brand is new, has no retail background, it's their first venture, and you're going into a retailer that actually requires them, it's best to bring one on before your line review, because that's when you're going to get the most use of them, is have them help you sell in, help you understand what the industry standard margins are, help you understand those push and pull moments, because that negotiating time is the most important time. I've seen people give up so much margin because they didn't know what was expected of them, and they just went off of, well, let me just give them the best cost that I can, but they didn't know instead of giving 70, they could have given 40.
Because their category margin is 40, but you just gave them 30%.
And of course, the buyer's not going to tell you like, no, I don't want the money, right? But if you either worked with a broker, they just say, hey, yo, Jazz, like the category average is 40. So let's go in at that. And so I think it's most important to have it before a line review if you are having one.
You have been very intentional with your strategy of how the trajectory of growth within retail. Like you aren't in all big box retail. You primarily partner with Target. What for you in your business, what are some KPIs that you are looking at to determine, one, not only the success of like, hey, are we financially healthy to be able to expand, but to just overall determine like, hey, this is what I need to look at. And how often are you looking at it? Because a lot of, you know how I feel about numbers.
Yes, I know.
A lot of business owners just don't look at numbers. They don't look at data, and the data is what tells the story. Like I've literally heard founders say, oh, I just move off vibes. I just move off what I'm feeling. Okay. Like I just it's whatever the vibe is, I'm creative. I don't think about all that. Like that. I just want to stay on my creative side, but then they ignore the analytical side and they aren't making strategic based decisions because they aren't looking at the data. So what are some of the key KPIs you look at?
I mean, I think the first thing I'm looking at is net profit, because for me, that helps me understand like how much cash do we actually have to like play with. And I don't believe in hiring ahead of need. I believe in hiring as you need things, and you need people to run these businesses for you. And with every retailer that you go in, the more your processes seem to be together and the more people you need to help the ship going. And so I think a lot of times what I see is a lot of my peers like go super fast, really hard. And then they realize that they don't have the right like team in place to support that growth. And so on a quarterly level, I'm sitting with my fractional CFO and we're talking about like, what's our profit looking like? We have a line of credit that helps support the business because I haven't taken any outside funding. So how's our line of credit looking? What is our cash flow looking like? What's our run rate? Like how many months of monthly expenses does our money allow for us to have? What big initiatives or what big pushes am I planning on doing that I think either might go amazing, so this can 2x what I think the budget will be, or things that if this don't hit, this is going to plummet the business. And if so, what are our what if scenarios with that, right? And so I'm always looking at like downside, upside, and do I have enough money to support us regardless? And so I personally, don't want to bring on another retailer until I feel like there's one that intimately has succeeded with my consumer, and that when I get there, I'm not having to build no category, that I'm in a category that is already doing okay, and I'm an amazing addition to it. But also, I don't want to bring on any other big box or bigger retailer until I feel like our cash is in a place in which I don't need them. That this is all icing on the cake, and that I don't need them. And that can come from multiple different ways, whether my DTC business has, gone up, and so that's, having us stay afloat, or whether it's my mid-sized retailers that I am working with now, that business is carrying on. But I think just like with investors, you should always bring on other big strategic partners when it's in a mutually beneficial standpoint, not when you're desperate and you're going to need them, because that's when you are always your back against the wall and you have to do things on their terms.
And you agree to anything.
And I don't believe in agreeing to anything.
So times are tough right now. We talked about this at dinner recently. Times are tough, especially in the retail space. You know, we're seeing a lot of product brands close, pivot, and it's hard for product brands right now. One, what do you think is going on? Because everybody want to blame inflation, right? But people are still spending. Like, I think when I was looking at data from National Retail Foundation, like, the trajectory is still up. It averages probably about 3.5% year over year, and it's continuing to grow. So, like, the industry as a whole isn't doing terrible. But small business owners are, suffering and closing their doors. So one, what do you think is happening? And two, what should businesses be doing to stay in the game?
Ooh, there's a lot of different things. So I think from the data that I've seen, like, yes, overall industry is up, but there's definitely certain pockets that are carrying that. So I think food, travel, and beauty are some of the categories that are like up.
Beauty's definitely up.
Everything else from what I've seen is either flat to down. So I think if you are in a category that's not one of those, you're probably feeling a tough time. I can speak on this from a retailer side. Typically in moments in which retailers aren't feeling like the economy is doing well, they start to revert back to the basics. So they start reverting back to those tried and true brands that they know that can get the job done, that can deliver on the margin and profitability that they're asking for, and that they know that can execute. And oftentimes, many of us small brands just don't fit that list yet, right? And so you're starting to see many retailers start to pull back on either their support of small brands, truly in not because they don't want to support for malicious reasons, but because they also have goals that they have to meet to their shareholders, right? You also saw maybe 3 to 4 years ago, the investment landscape was up. So you was seeing everybody post about, here's the $1 million that I got, the $2 million that I got. I'm one of the, and I shouldn't say up, because let's be clear, it's less than like 1% of all investment goes to Black women. But in comparison, it felt like a lot of people were getting investment, right? But once you get invested in, you have to always think about, like, what's that next round going to look like? And so people were kind of running through cash at that same rate, supporting the sales that they had before, not expecting a slowdown, and then not also expecting the landscape to change to make it even harder to get money, because the goalpost had moved. Originally, it was forget about profitability. We're only chasing sales. So brands forgot about profitability and chased those sales. Now it's, what do you mean you don't have profitability? And so people have had to pivot, right? And so that's hard. That's harder for brands that have been on that journey for a while to be able to make that pivot. And maybe your company isn't structured in a way to do so. I think the brands that will survive are the brands that are being really scrappy around their metrics, that are having to make some really tough decisions. I know quite a few of my peers have had to let go of their teams in the same way that you're seeing these big retailers do so. And also just not chasing growth. They're chasing survival. in this moment. And that can be really hard for a lot of us overachieving entrepreneurs that are used to winning, right? Especially you just came off several years of up,
right?
And now you're going through some down times. And so I think that the best brands are the ones that can like ride that wave and understand that like the goal is to get to tomorrow, is not to like necessarily overexceed. It's just, I tell my team, whoever has cash at the end of the year gets to play again next year. And so that's how I look at it.
I hope you guys heard that. Whoever has cash at the end of the year can play again next year. Like, so maybe this season of your business isn't sales. Maybe it's not increasing by 20%, 30%, 5%. Maybe it's you figuring out, how do I need to get more scrappy in my business? What are some things I need to cut? How can I get leaner? How can I get back into the weeds and the grassroots metrics to really just kind of, not the grassroots marketing, to really just grow and expand? So I want to ask Jasmin. So when I think about and this, and the reason that I created this podcast is because I am this, and this, and this, and this too. And that's okay. It's okay to be multi-passionate. It's okay to be multifaceted. It's okay to not stay in a box or be in a box that you think you're supposed to be in. And so I want to ask Jasmin, when you hear the words "and this," what do you think?
I think immediately what comes to me is that, like, I know that my passion is to center my work around Black women. So today that means I'm running the dopest stationery brand, Be Rooted, that y'all have ever seen. And tomorrow it might mean that I'm going to have an investment fund that invests back in Black women. And that might mean in 20 years from now that I'm running a community organization that invests back in Black women. Whatever it means, it'll always be centered around my purpose. But I'm okay with what that and this might look for me like today and tomorrow.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jasmin, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you guys took some notes for this episode. This episode was truly, truly amazing. I mean, we talked about your financials, you know, having success in mass retail, things that you need to be asking before going into mass retail, and so much. But I want Jasmin, please share, like, first, please go to Target and support Be Rooted. Please. But please tell the people where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can support you.
So Be Rooted is at Be Rooted Co. on all social channels. And if you're interested in following a little bit about my life, I talk about retail and just like what's going on with me. I'm at the Jasmin Foster on all social channels.